you bring something to the table that is particularly you. What I love about Ishmael is that he doesn't hesitate to basically point a finger at injustice and the things that are happening around us. What I'd like is just for about 5 minutes, if Ishmael, Sonia, and Gloria, if you could just, all together talk about what do you think was so important, because the book that that you're all in is Black Fire This Time. For you, what was important about this time period? It doesn't even have to be the Black arts movement, but what about the 60s and 70s really informs your work and you feel very strongly about? Gloria, you want to start?
Well, I can say something that was very important for me during that period was coming to grips with the reality that we weren't alone here in our freedom fight, that we belong to a very, very, very big world, right? Africans all over the world, and that we were a part of struggles that were going on both on the African continent and in Africa, Asia, Latin America, right? Part of the third world, right? We belonged to those struggles, that we could stop thinking of being isolated somehow, right? We could struggle as a human rights struggle, not this sort of narrow civil rights effort that was going on here. So to think about our struggle for freedom in that larger context made the way that I approached movement and the way that I shared with other brothers and sisters very different after that. And I think that's part of that whole Black consciousness movement that happened during the period, our coming to that sort of realization, look, we're part of this wonderful world, this African world. Brothers and sisters are everywhere, and we're united in struggle. And just as they are trying to decolonize, to be independent, we are doing the same here. We're fighting the same, we're making the same struggle here in the United States.
Thank you. That's what you said was powerful, because when you're growing up and you say you're a United States citizen, you don't think of yourself, at least to begin with, as a colonized people. Yeah. Thank you. Sonia, what about that time period? What about that time period you felt very strongly about, that really resonated with you, for good or bad, and that and basically informed your work?
Well, I think what I just said was so important, that what many of us actually, I was in college when I began to see what the students were doing in the South. I was in college when people came, on campus there at Hunter College and talked about going to some cell meetings and on Amsterdam Avenue in New York City. And we did all that, many of us, going in, watching, listening to new ideas about this country called America. What I know is that I have always tasted the injustice, having been born in a place called Birmingham, Alabama, and watching my grandmother constantly being disrespected, watching my father, a school teacher and a jazz musician, change up on me when he was summoned by a white male, watching my grandmother trying to get in an elevator to go someplace with me and my sister. And when she got ready to get in, she was told to, stay out because there were all whites in there. This kind of thing I brought to a place called New York City. I brought to a place where my dad said that it would be different. And then we were sequestered in a junior high school in New York City, where they were really mostly Blacks, and we were not taught the way we should have been taught. That we struggle a great deal, my sister and I, and others, to do the work, to, in quotes, prove to our teachers that we were capable of speaking French and Latin and Spanish also, just as well as when we went to high school as the rest of those kids, but we were always, we understood the subjugation that went on. But I also understood the subjugation that went on too when I got out of college and went looking for a job before I started teaching in the fall. I was, I had just turned 20 years of age, answered an ad and went looking for a job. And the job, they looked at me and said the job was taken. And I answered an ad finally in the New York Times. They said they wanted a writer for this firm. And I sent them a sample of my writing and a CV. And I got a telegram. Most of the audience here will not know what a telegram is, right, my dear brother and my dear sister, right, sisters. And I took the telegram and held it in front of my father and said, see, I can get a job writing. And I showed up at that job in a blue suit, blue heels, a hat sitting AC-doocy, white gloves, whatever, and with the telegram. And I did not get there late. I got there not at 9 o'clock, I got there at 8:30. And I was finally let in by the secretary, and I handed her the telegram. Have you ever had someone look at something and look up at you, then look at something and then look up at you, and then look at something, look back at you and hand you the telegram, and complete like confusion ensued. And I finally, at 1:45, the guy came out, and said, yes, can I help you? I handed him the telegram. He did the same a bit as the young woman had done. And he looked at me and said, the job is full. It's been filled. And I said, it's 8:45. I said, oh, I got it. I come from New York City, right? I got it. I said, I'm gonna go back outside in the hallway and then I will reappear at 9 o'clock and we'll be cool, right? And the guy did not laugh and say, that's true. He said, the job is taken. And I left out of there mad, took the hat off, took the gloves off, got on the subway. If you know New York City, you got to get off at 96th Street to stay on the west side. And I sat there really crying all the way. And I ended up at 135th Street in front of Harlem Hospital, walking a third into the block. And there was a sign that said the Schomburg. Huh. And I went into the Schomburg, and lo and behold, Miss Jean Hudson was there. And it was a long table, nothing but African scholars with book. And I knocked on the door and I told her my name. And I said, what is the Schomburg? She said, oh, my dear young one. She said, the Schomburg has books only by and about Negroes. And I said with my fast 20-year-old mouth, tongue, I said, there must not be many books in here, huh? She never let me forget that ever. Every time I took my students to the Schomburg, she would tell that story, and but she sat me down, and 20 minutes later, she brought me 3 books, Up from Slavery, Souls of Black Folk, and Their Eyes Are Watching God. And there in that place, as I read and had to translate Their Eyes Are Watching God, because that was Black English. Don't you call it dialect. It was Black English there, being written there and spoken there. And I got up and knocked on the door and said, what's your name again? And she said, Miss Hudson. I said, Miss Hudson, how could I be a graduate of a school, a college, and never read this? She said, oh, go sit down, my dear. Oh my, just sit down. I will give you more and more books. And she did. And, and I got up again and said the same thing. And finally, one of the African scholars said, Miss Hudson, tell this young woman either she sits still or she has to leave. And I sat still for the rest of the summer. I would leave the house telling my father I was looking for a job, and I went to the Schomburg. And the Schomburg made me understand who I was. All of those authors, all of those writers, Miss Hudson, sent me to the 2 Black bookstores on 125th Street, where they gave me bags of books, and I read, in that Schaumburg, and I was filled up to here. And I knew never again, would I cry about someone refusing to give me what was due me, but my energy would be propelled towards them, as some of you Ish can tell you, some of us, saying, who does that MF think he is? Woo, whatever. Because there I was, on this road, on this train, watching, people like our dear sister in the South, moving, helping Black folks, changing everything in the place called the South, being New York core, being slick workers. And here we were in the North and in the South, working together and understanding at some point that we had to go down this journey that would say we are indeed not only Black men and women, but we are holy Black men and women. We're holy in our walk. We're holy in our struggle. We're holy in our words and our writings. We're holy with our vision for this place called America. Watch out, here we is. And there we was, and here we is still. And it's an honor to be here with so many of you, who are on this holy walk, towards, not only freedom, but towards justice and humanity in the world.
I am so glad this is being taped, because that was a poem. That was
good. Play it back for me.
It's your poem.
And have it. You don't know what a joy is. What a joy is to see, some of you. I just miss the people. When this pandemic is over, I want us all to get a central place to meet people, so we can hang out together. I'm not a drinker, but I sure will drink some wine, on that day in this celebration of all of us coming together. I will dance I even get up on the table and dance the way I did in Cuba, when I had a little half a glass of wine and got up on the table and dance and then jump off the table. But at my age, I would not be jumping off a table at this particular time, but it'll be a joy to have a little sip of wine and see all your faces, because you still wear, I look at you, my dear sister and my dear brother, and all the rest of you, my sister, and I see that anxiety, that anxiousness, to do this work that we need to do. I know that we have seen horrors at this particular point, but always behind those horrors, I always see that road, that has the beauty just waiting for us. Just right. Come on, y'all. I've seen you for a long time, in a place called America, in a place called Africa, in a place called the world, but I'm waiting for you because you will be victorious and we will be victorious.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Ishmael, because I know we all have different stories about the 60s, the 70s, what made the difference, what informed your writing. And I know you were a part of Umbra, but was there anything that really stuck out for you that really you felt like carved your voice in that time period?
Well, I was 22 when I went to New York. I thought if you were a good writer, you get it over. Then I found it was politics. It's only a choice of the coin who's going to be a diva and who's not going to be one. Or divas. I think the male gender is divas, D-I-V-U-S. But I learned how to print books in New York. And so when I came to the West Coast, I started printing a lot of books. The first book was published on a dare. It was by Allison Mills. It was called Francisco, and it received an endorsement from Toni Morrison, whom I helped on her Black book. I actually collaborated with her on that. And Allison Mills got a great reception also from William Denby, whose book I published a couple of years ago called King Comus, one of the great writers of the 20th century. Couldn't find a publisher before he died. I went to Rome and his son let me publish his book, King Comus. I published Mamie Bursenberger and Joy Harjo in 1979. Mamie Bursenberger just got the Bulletin Prize and was a Pulitzer Prize finalist last year. Joy Harjo, I published her second book, She's an unknown. It's called What Moon Drove Me to This. She's been the poet laureate for 3 terms.
That's right.
Then I not only published women in this country, but abroad. I published 16 short stories by Nigerian women after a trip to Nigeria. I sold that to the Egyptian Center for Translation, and it was translated into Arabic. I published Colleen McElroy when she was relatively unknown. They just named a room after her at the University of Washington. Then we published a series of magazines. Al Young and I published Yardbird, Reader, published a lot of people who've gone on to win Pulitzer Prizes and all kinds of National Book Awards. And then we had Quilt, then we had Widebird, and then we had, excuse me, Conk, which my daughter runs. I started Conk magazine in 1990, and my daughter, Tennessee, who's a master with Photoshop and all that stuff, she got a degree in a couple of degrees, one from Mills, and then she studied the mechanics of putting a magazine and a book together at Berkeley City College. And so the latest issue, the most recent issue, was a tribute to Miguel Algarín. Sonia and all of us know Miguel, who's the founder of the Nuyorican movement. And so we have about 60 contributors, 23 women, Latino women, contributing to that. So we put out that publication 4 times a year. And then we decided that the National Book Award, or the National Book Foundation, which is run by people like Ralph Lauren. I mean, they may have some colored faces up front, but if you look at the directors, these are capitalists, big publishing companies, and Ralph Lauren. I thought they made clothes. They might have Starbucks. I don't know, but we felt that we have a board of directors that includes Pulitzer Prize winners and everybody. Booker Prize, we got Marlon James on our board of directors, and so we feel we have a better judgment of what's happening in Native American, Asian American, Latino. We have a better. Juan Felipe Herrera, who's been with us for a long time. He's a former U.S. poet laureate, and the great Rudy Anaya, who just died, wrote this classic novel, Bless Me Ultima, and he and I were raising hell back there in the 70s, but he died recently. They got a big celebration here. As a matter of fact, the Library of America is doing this stuff. Then another thing I learned in New York, I just want to make a footnote about Allison Mills. New Directions just bought that book that we published in 1974, our first book. She went on to become a prison chaplain. She worked with women prisoners now. But another thing I learned in New York was how anthologies like the one that Kim put together here can be acts of resistance. I learned that from Walter Lowenfels and Langston Hughes. I took Lucille Clifton's poetry. She's a housewife in Buffalo. I took her poetry to Langston Hughes, and he published them in Poetry of the Negro. And she went on to get the National Book Award, and now her home is a landmark in Maryland. But I went to, I found through those two, Langston Hughes, they were the hippest old men. I go to Walter Lowenfeld's house. He's in his 70s playing John Coltrane, and Langston Hughes would invite me to come down and have a drink at Max's Kansas City, which at that time was the hippest place in town. But I learned that talent is common. Talent is common. I did an anthology called From Total to Hip Hop, put my students in there, and these professors couldn't tell a difference. I had these canonized people all, just famous poets. And I put my students in there just as a cause of mischief. And I went to this, was it the English Teachers Union or whatever, professors, and I read a poem by a student, I read a poem by a canonized poet, and I said, which is a student, and 50% said the student was a canonized poet, and 50% said the canonized poet was a student. So I got a call recently from BBC saying they want to use one of the poems by a student. Cynthia Gomez in my class wrote a poem about San Jose and BBC. They asked for that twice. I finally traced her down through the Alumni Association. I published Terry McMillan. First one to publish Terry McMillan. She's my student. I published Mona Simpson, who's now the publisher of the Paris Review. And so I learned through anthologies. And I think what I would say, the headline I would give for Kim's anthology is she brought all the factions together. You know, these were male anthologies like, was it Elaine Locke's portrait, Elaine Locke's Harlem Renaissance poetry anthology was mostly guys. Okay. And then we got the New Negro. Then we got Black Fire. And a lot of people put down black arts. I had problems with black arts, but I would give them credit for democratizing black poetry and getting hundreds of people to write who never thought about writing poetry. I'd say the same thing about Chicago, Hakeem. And they would, I think it was George Street's idea, they take a flatbed truck and go out and deliver poetry and plays and music to people of Harlem. But internal divisions, you can read Amiri's book, Amiri Baraka, Leroy Jones, the autobiography, it's all in there.